Thank you very much, Ellen. Welcome everyone to our planning board meeting for July the 4th, Monday that is. Just a couple of footnotes first. I know we have the microphone system now, but for your request to speak, just put your hand up instead of lighting up the mic, and just mic on and mic off after you're done. Because once you get up to 4, it'll just push somebody off anyway, or I have to push somebody off. So the best thing is just, instead of waiting for some, because all of a sudden there could be 6 of us want to speak, and it won't allow that. So just for when you want to speak, just put your hand up, and then when it's your turn, put your mic on, and then off when you're done. Okay, if you just don't mind. Thank you very much. So we'll call our meeting to order. Declarations of conflict of interest. I see none. Thank you. Approval of the agenda. I'll need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Cheryl and seconded by Councilor Alana, sorry. All those in favor? Good, unanimous. Thank you very much. Adoption of the minutes. I'll need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Bob Kenny, seconded by Mr. Conley. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Any discussion from those minutes? See none. We'll move right into the business of reports, and the first is a variant for 8 Browse Lane, pin 425876, and I believe, Emily, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, the first item on the agenda this evening is a major variance request, and it is to permit an appointment-based hair and aesthetic studio at 8 Browse Lane. It would operate within a portion of an existing single detached dwelling. So a personal service shop like a hair and aesthetic studio is not a permitted home occupation listed in that section of the zoning bylaw. However, Regulation 5.9.3 states that additional home occupation uses, such as appointment-based operations that typically operate on an hourly basis or as scheduled, may be considering by way of the major variance process. And in accordance with the regulations of the zoning bylaw, with these appointment-based home occupation proposals, City Council must determine the maximum number of clients permitted on the premise at any one time, as well as the parking requirement that would apply. So just to briefly review the application, you see here an aerial view image of the existing single detached dwelling. The green pin shows you the property. And then we also have a site plan sketch that was submitted by the applicant. You see there in the green, the portion of the existing dwelling that they're looking to locate the hair and aesthetic studio in. And in terms of the operation itself, they're looking to operate between Wednesday and Sunday from 11 to 6 p.m. They're looking to have no more than 2 clients on the property at any one time, with up to 6 clients appointments per day. There would be 1 employee, which would be the owner and resident of the main dwelling. The home occupation would only occupy about 218 square feet of the existing dwelling, and it would be served by a driveway that can accommodate 3 parking spaces that meet our minimum parking space requirements. And these parking spaces would be provided in tandem style, which is permitted under the home occupation section of the zoning bylaw. So we did receive 1 letter through the public notification process, and it was in support of the application, and that is included in your package if you'd like to review that. So I think we're getting our slide deck up to date here. Thank you, Ellen. We have determined as a department that this application conforms with the official plan objective to support home occupations in residential zones. The number and timing of appointments, our department is of the opinion it represents a low intensity use of the property that will generate a limited traffic impact on Browse Lane. We feel that the 3 tandem parking spaces are sufficient to serve the proposed home occupation and the main dwelling unit as well. And this proposal does meet all requirements in the home occupation section of the zoning bylaw. Apart from, the parking and the number of appointments, which would be determined by council. Therefore, we're of the opinion it would not detract from or conflict with the low density character of the surrounding neighborhood. So in light of this, we're recommending approval of this application, subject to the condition that it meets all the kind of parameters that they have put forward for this proposal, and they're outlined there. So if you folks have any questions, feel free to bring those forward. I would note that the applicant is here as well and is open to any questions you folks may have.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. Do we have any questions or concerns on this one? Councillor Yankoff.
Thank you, and thank you, Emily, for your report. With the conditions, what happens, because I know a lot of times in the residential areas now, we're hearing from residents that there's more than 2 vehicles per family now, and all of a sudden they're flowing out onto the streets and it becomes mini parking lots. I'm wondering, so what happens in this case if it says on-street parking is prohibited? What happens if that becomes a problem? Does this then become revoked and they can no longer have the business there? Or how do we ensure that it does not disrupt the harmony of the neighborhood?
For sure. Thank you for that, Councillor Yankoff. So through the chair, I think there's 2 options available to residents that typically we see come through our department. It would be a complaint that surrounding residents can make. There's a form they can complete, application form, and submit it to our office with their concern, if it were specifically the parking concern, and then we would, look back at the conditions of approval. We would reach out to the applicant owner and outline the concerns and that it needs to be addressed. If it cannot be addressed, we often reach out to the city solicitor's office for their support as well, because it could become, a legal proceeding from there. So that's kind of our enforcement mechanism as a department. Also, police services does have authority over, traffic, road safety, so that's another option as well.
Thank you very much, Emily and Alana. Thank you. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Okay, I see none. I guess I'll be looking for a motion to put forward. Moved by Paul Connolly that we recommend this to go on to council to approve a major variance for the home occupation. So I have a mover and I need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Yankoff. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is everybody. Thank you very much. Okay. So the second part of A is the 64 King, 151 Great George, and 89 Kent Street. The request for a major variance to permit mural artwork to cover a portion of the existing buildings. And I believe, Emily, you're away again.
Okay, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this request is coming as a result of approved housekeeping amendments to the zoning bylaw that occurred in 2021, and that was to permit the major variance application process to be applied where there's a recommendation from Arts Advisory Board for a proposed mural or sign to be located on a building or structure in the 500 lot area. And they deem it to be aesthetically appropriate in nature, location, size, and scale for enhancing and supporting the art and cultural needs of a community or the city and wider community as well. So we received 3 applications from the city's Economic Development, Tourism, and Events Department to permit mural artwork to cover a portion of existing building on 3 separate properties in the 500 lot area. Each mural is proposed to be painted as part of the Festival Inspire, which is proposed to take place in Charlottetown from July 18th to 23rd, 2022. We're fortunate to have Doug Dumas here as well, who represents the Arts Advisory Committee, and he is, I'm sure, much more versed in Festival Inspire than I am, but again, I welcome any questions you guys have about it as well. It's also, details are in the report. I'll just quickly review each of the proposals. The first relates to 64 King Street, specifically the city cinema portion of that building. It's for a mural design and to be painted by Jun Kim to cover a portion of the north facade of that building. We did receive one letter through the public notification. It just indicated concerns with upkeep, maintenance, restoration, and longevity of the proposed mural. This application was reviewed and accepted by Arts Advisory Board as well as Heritage Board because this property does have a heritage designation that applies to it. And the proposal was authorized by the property owner as well. So here you see just the view from aerial view of the portion of the building where they're looking to locate it above the main entrance to City Cinema. And the proposal on the right, the concept. So our department's recommending approval, subject to a few conditions: that the mural conforms with the submitted description and concept, that the applicant proceeds with a sign permit that would be issued by our department, and that the owner works in partnership with the festival and with the Economic Development, Tourism, and Events Department to ensure that the mural does not become unsightly due to paint fading, chipping, tagging, etc. The next application relates to 89 Kent Street, which our city knows best as the city's fire station #1. So the proposed mural would be designed and painted by Aleko Virus van den Berg. I think that's the artist's name, but correct me if I'm wrong, Doug. That's a tricky one. It's to cover the west facade of the existing building, which faces the parking lot of the Rod Charlottetown Hotel. We did not receive any letters through the public notification process regarding this application. It was reviewed and accepted by Arts Advisory Board, and we did receive the authorization of the city's CAO, who we have with us this evening. We're fortunate to have her here, and the deputy fire chief as well. So you can see in the bottom right of the slide the mural concept that's being put forward. So similar to the conditions that we're recommending for that previous mural, we're recommending the same for this, with the addition of update to the mural color palette to incorporate fire engine red color. And this is a recommendation from the city's Arts Advisory Board, so we'll support that recommendation as well. The final proposal is for a mural designed and painted by Mr. Piero at 151 Great George Street. This is a commercial and office building just at the Kent and Great George Street intersection. It would be to cover a portion of the west facade of the existing building there. We didn't receive any letters regarding this proposal through the public notification process. Again, the application was reviewed and accepted by Arts Advisory Board, and it was authorized by the property owner, Dine Holdings. So you can see at the bottom right the concept that's being put forward. And we're recommending approval as well with the same conditions applied to the previous application. So conforming with the concept, sign permit would apply, and then working with the festival and the Economic Development Department to ensure the upkeep and maintenance of the mural as well. So this concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions, and Doug is here as well. If you folks want to clarify anything. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. Great presentation. Any questions or comments to be made? Doug is here. Doug, would you like the opportunity to say anything that Emily didn't say, or? Sure, yeah, yeah. Yes, you're in my chair, that's right. And you have a question, okay, great.
I have nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions here. Yeah, I'm just here on behalf of the Arts Advisory Board. I provided administrative assistance, and I'm here on behalf of Laurel Lee, the tourism officer, as well. So I'm well versed on the file and very excited to see this come forward.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, Councillor Yankoff.
I just have a more of a positive comment on these three murals. Interestingly enough, the one by the City Cinema, if you see the little, almost like bubbles through it, they're tying it into, because it used to be a bottling building, so they've tied the bubbles in there to try and bring in the memory of the old bottling manufacturing spot or whatever. And the other thing I would note, that although the artists are, they're muralists that are not PEI artists, because we at this time we didn't have any muralists apply to do this work, but they are offering a kind of a professional development session with 20 local artists to give them some professional development and artistic tips around muraling outside of buildings. So I just wanted to add that it's a really win-win good news story. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And perhaps Doug, you could, we do know the story on that one, but the other two, would you care to give a little brief explanation as to what the two other paintings represent, the murals represent? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the other artists, here I'll draw your attention to Mr. Pirro, the abstract one that will be on Great George Street. So this one, that's very much in keeping with the artist's style. It's very kind of abstract, and I think it'll bring a lot of color to the area. As we know, it's kind of a sort of beige part of town, so I think it'll be very bright, and it is sort of just an access corridor between the Kent Street Market and that office building, so it's already a fairly vibrant area. You know, there's a few murals in the area, so it's in terms of the actual details of the artwork, there wasn't anything specific. We gave kind of prompts that related to that area, and the artist provided this that's in his style. Same with the 64 Kent Street, I believe is 89 Kent Street, pardon me. The mural concept is very much in keeping with the artist's style. You'll see there's an owl and a fox, which we did request that a fox be included just because it's a symbol of PEI and also is featured on our crest. You know, we like to make sure that the artist can do something that they like, that is in line with their style, but is also sort of tailored to the particular environment of Charlottetown. And as Councillor Yankoff mentioned too, this is a great opportunity to bring in international artists who bring a lot of expertise. Making murals that are 3,300 square feet is not easy. It requires knowledge of using boom trucks and other materials that artists are not usually familiar with unless they're given opportunities such as this. So we're hoping to build capacity going forward to be able to bring in local artists, local being Charlottetown, but also perhaps PEI, but also, you know, the Atlantic going forward, to just make sure that that it's art that is for and by Islanders, and this is a great first step.
Thank you very much, Doug. Great explanation. Any questions for on it or for Doug? Go ahead, Mr. Connolly.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and it'll be I think a great asset to the city. I mean, obviously the only questions relate to ongoing maintenance and restoration. What happens in the event that it is determined that it needs to be updated? Do they go back to the original artist?
I believe it will fall under the Economic Development Committee, and of course they have a budget, and I would assume they would reach out. Doug, you probably might know more as to whether they would. The trouble with that is bringing the artists back, because they're international artists and they're from various parts. I don't know how that would work, but maybe Doug, you could shine a little more light on that.
Sure, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So The intent of the murals is that we're putting it in quotes, permanent. So as long as they add value, as you mentioned, to the city's public art collection, and as long as they're in good shape, they'll be there. The festival uses pretty high quality painting materials, so we have an estimated goal of a 9-year lifespan, which is of course dependent on the conditions of the walls and exposure to elements. So we do have the contract between the festival and the building owner state that the festival is committed to moderate maintenance for 3 years, which includes painting over in case there's graffiti or anything. Following that, it also stipulates that the mural can be painted over entirely at the discretion of the building owner and the city. So say in 9 years, the work is not deemed to be of value to the city's public art collection, it would be up to the city or the building owner to just make the decision to completely paint over it, whether that's with another mural, the same artist, or just returning to the original color. There's no stipulation whatsoever that we need to do the additional costs of bringing over that specific artist beyond the 3 years, and that would be the responsibility of Festival Inspire. So I hope that answers your question, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the answer. Have we defined it, Doug, as far as like at whose cost would it be in 9 years' time? Would the city incur the cost of if the owner says, "Look, I don't want that anymore. I want it painted over"? Has that been discussed?
I don't know if that's stipulated in the contract, but I can say that it would be painted overly at the discretion. So say if it was the building owner, it would be up to their discretion. I imagine it would be their responsibility to paint over it. We asked that they consult with the city prior to this, of course. If it was the city who determined to do so, I think it would be our cost. And I can't speak to the cost, but I imagine that hasn't been outlined in the contract, but I may be wrong. I can relate to that question, yeah.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Councillor Yankov, you have a question?
Just as a follow-up from Councillor McLeod, maybe perhaps between now and our council meeting, it could just be added to the report for council in case they have the same question. I would anticipate that we're all going to support this. I'm only assuming, but we could still have that clarified at our council meeting.
Yeah, it's just you don't want that surprise, right?
That's right,
At the end,
yeah.
but yeah, Councillor McCabe, you have a question or a comment?
I'm just curious, does this not come back through economic development now, or does it go straight to council from here?
I think it would go directly to council from here, I believe, as far as I understand. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or concerns? If not, we're going to need a motion here for the major variance to permit the mural artwork on the 3 properties. So, moved by Councillor Yankov, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All those in favor? That would be everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Doug. We'll go to B of our reports, which is rezoning and site-specific exemptions. The first one is 15 St. Dunstan Street, PID number 1075993, and I believe Robert Zilke is here to do the presentation. Thank you, Emily, very much. Just waiting on Robert. I see him coming there. Yeah. So it's 15 St. Dunstan Street, Robert?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So this is a request to approve the amendment to the CDA zone, and the property location is 15 St. Dunstan Street. It's existing site of the existing Princess Auto. The point of the CDA amendment is to allow for a 5,000 square foot addition to increase the retail floor sales area. This is where the addition will be, situated to the east portion of the building. As the board will recall, there is an environmental protection regulations that are in place due to the Ellens Creek Watershed Protection Buffer that's situated to the north. The existing development agreement does contain provisions to minimize construction impacts on the creek itself during situations for runoff and fill placement. So those provisions will still stand if this were to be approved, since that runs along with the property via development agreement that's registered on title. So this is the existing Princess Auto building, and this shows the additional retail floor area that is going to be constructed. And then this is the revised elevations that the applicant submitted, and we showed these at the public meeting itself. So our recommendation is to approve and amend the CDA zone as it relates to not only Appendix B, so inserting that property within Appendix B for site-specific amendments, as well as altering the development agreement and reattach the revised site plan to allow for the 5,000 square foot addition. I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Any concerns, questions, comments? Pretty straightforward. Okay, so we'll need a motion here to either agree or disagree with staff's recommendation. So we'll start with, so moved to be in favor, moved by Bob Kenny, seconded by Councillor Yankoff, that we update the existing CDA development to allow the 5,000 square foot addition. All those in favor? That's everyone again. Thank you very much. Moving along pretty good here. And before we go any further, excuse my ignorance, but I forgot to introduce our acting CAO, Donna Waddell, to Planning Board. It's a dear committee that she likes to keep an eye on, and I'm glad. Yeah, I've been watching her for a long time. Well, welcome aboard, Donna. My regrets that I didn't. Yeah, we're all under the eye. Okay, so we'll move on to number 4, 93 and 95 Belvedere Avenue, PID number 373092 and 373100. And Robert, it's a request to go to a public meeting. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a request to proceed to public meeting in order to allow for the subject properties, 93 and 95 Belvedere Avenue, which is owned by UPEI, to be rezoned from low-density residential to institutional and have the official plan designation change to match. Basically, these properties are currently vacant. They were purchased and acquired by UPEI several years ago. They've been acting as temporary sites for construction trailers while the new UPEI residence was built. Now the university is looking at rezoning these 2 low-density residential properties to institutional and then consolidate it with their main property located at 560 University Ave. So this is a request to proceed to public consultation, which staff supports, and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Any comments and concerns? Okay, we'll start up. Go ahead, Councillor Yankoff.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering if UPEI has any particular plan for what they plan to do with those 2 parcels if they are changed their zoning.
Robert, do you want to, any comments on that one?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Yankoff. The initial plan was to consolidate the parcels in order to construct a parking lot. However, we received communication from UPEI that that is no longer the plan. For now, UPEI just plans on consolidating those lots with 560 University Ave, and that is why they are requesting the change in the designation and the zone to match the principal property at 560, which is institutional.
Just to follow up?
Sure.
I'm just a bit concerned because if we don't know what's happening, once it's zoned institutional, then it's zoned. And there's a whole list of things that could happen there. And I was always under the assumption that if you were applying to rezone it, you were applying with the information shared to the committee, to council, and to the residents, what was actually going to go there. So I would be hesitating just in case. I mean, there's a long list of options that could go there once it's zoned.
For sure. Good point. I don't know what more else we can say to it, but would it be possible, Robert, that we could have that to come forward for council? Because I'm sure it will be asked again. Is that something that we could look into?
I could certainly get in touch with the contact from UPEI. Like I said before, they were looking at changing that into a parking lot, but then they changed their plans. For now, from what the correspondence that I've had so far with them, and I've taken this file over from a previous planner that worked here, their intention was just to consolidate those lots with their main property. But that's correct that if the lot consolidation were to happen, institutional, and the designation was approved, then they could use that property, barring that they adhere to all requirements of the zoning and development bylaw. They could use that property for anything in the permitted uses table of the institutional zone.
I guess one of the concerns that, and I'm glad Councillor Yancock brought it up, and that is the fact that, we're looking at doing something with Belvedere Avenue there, and you'd hate to have our plans all done and then to have the request to come in for another driveway or entranceway, or that would interfere with our plans, especially that right-handed lane as we go down toward the intersection. It's quite serious there. Yes, one more.
One more. So the request is to decide whether or not to go to public consultation. I can't help but assume not to put the words in the residents of Charlottetown's mouth, but the first question you're going to be asked at a public consultation meeting is, what are you doing with it? And I won't be supporting the application until I know what is happening, or even to go to public consultation.
And that's a good point, and we'll and perhaps the applicant can bring that forward when it comes to the public meeting. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. I'm kind of with Councillor Yankoff. I think, to have some sense before I'm okay with it going to a public meeting, but it's wasting their time if they're not coming to the public meeting with an idea of what they're what they're looking at with an industrial rezoning, because there's lots of things they can rezone for, but unless they know there's no real rush, they own the land. If there's no plan, it's really important to have a plan.
It'd just be nice to know. And resident member Shalon Murray, thanks for waiting. I'll ask one anyway. Come on. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I believe the university has a full plan for all of their properties. So I would anticipate if Robert was in consultation with them. I remember a number of years ago they did it, they presented it to council. I don't know how long ago it was. It seems like yesterday. But I would think that if Robert, acquiring those three properties was always part of their plan. And I would anticipate that they do have some ideas on their plan. I think we have a copy of their plan, Robert, somewheres from way back when, but I think if you talk to them, they'll be able to provide you with that information.
Okay, thank you very much. And Robert, we'll follow up, and hopefully they'll be able to shine the light on that when we come to the public meeting process. Any, Rosemary Herbert? Sure. The speaker one there, the one with the voice, right down below, right there,
Is the rest of the university zoned institutional? I'm assuming that it is.
Robert, you want to confirm that?
Yep, the remainder of the university is zoned institutional. There are separate parcels, but by and large, it's all institutional. And again, just as follow-up to the previous questions, I think the long-term plan of UPI was to acquire all those residential properties along there and then eventually just consolidate them with the campus itself. So I believe that's always been their plan, but I can certainly follow up with the applicant that's making the application on their behalf.
Well, thank you very much. Does that answer, Rosemary? Okay, thank you. Any other comments, concerns? Mr. Hambley down in the corner.
So the third property, is that in their possession now? Because they're not looking to change it, just the other two.
I believe so. Robert, it was any discussion on that third property that you
Yeah,
could share?
so if you're referring to 99 Belvedere, I believe that is, I don't believe they've purchased or acquired that property yet. That is an active residential home right now, so someone that resides with the owner of that property itself.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments, concerns? None? Okay, so we'll need a motion to move this to a public meeting. Oh, sure, I'll ask away.
And I'm just trying to jump
No
ahead here.
motion's
Are
needed.
there other things to go to public consultation?
I think there's one more, I believe, is there not, or is there not?
There are 3 others?
Yes, there
Okay,
is.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
want to go to public consultation without the information unless
Yeah.
we're going anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for the motion. Moved by Paul Connolly, seconded by, anybody wants? I would assume Robert could probably send us an email after he discusses it with, to the planning board, just so we are aware before going into the public meeting. I guess that's okay with me anyway. If you guys are okay with it? Okay, so okay, there's been no motion. Yeah, the motion's on the floor. Okay, so we'll finish with the motion then. So moved by, who did I say it was? Rosemary, was it? Or Paul, sorry. Moved by Paul, seconded by Basil Hambley. Any discussion before we vote? Councillor Yankoff.
I just a comment that I'm not going to support to go to public consultation until I know what's planning to be built there, because I know that's exactly what residents are going to want to know. So I don't know if we can defer it until we have that information. It just seems, I know we already are going to a public consultation anyways, but until I knew what the plan was, I'm not comfortable having that rezoned to institutional until we have the plan.
Okay, so I think it'd be safe to say that, you'd hate to slow it down just for this, but Robert, if you could, I guess just to put a little more pressure on you, if you could follow up with the university and just say that was the one concern we have going into the public meeting, that we would like to have some indication of what they're going to do. But I understand too, they probably might not want to release that until the public meeting, but this is part of the process and we would like to know, so, yeah. Okay, good. So with that in mind, the motion's on the floor. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Bob, you put your hand up? Yeah, I did. Okay, cool. And those against? 1. So we have 7 to 1. Okay. Thank you very much. It's good debate, guys. It's good to ask these questions for sure. Okay, number 5, Sandalwood subdivision, extension of Much Crescent, PID number 773051, and it's a request for a rezoning, so I'll leave that on the floor to Laurel. Thank you. Don't forget your mic, please.
So, good evening, everyone. This application was before the board last month, and the board voted to proceed to public consultation, and council also agreed with the board's recommendation. So, the public meeting was held on June 28th. I'm not going to go through all the details of the application because the board is already familiar with it. However, we did follow the notification requirements that are outlined in the bylaw, and on June 14th, 62 letters were sent to property owners located within 100 meters of the property, and we did receive, I believe, 14 letters back. The report indicates 13, but we did discover that there was an additional letter later on. All the letters that we received were in opposition to the proposed rezoning from R2S to R1, R1S to R1N. Some of the comments that we received at the public meeting, many of the concerns revolved around traffic and how many people would speed through Sandalwood subdivision. There was also concerns that additional single detached dwelling lots would increase traffic considerably in the subdivision. Some residents had concerns that when children were playing on the street or near the street and walking to the elementary school and park, that it was, that traffic would pose a danger. And they also felt that the additional cars generated from the development would cause a hazard, and they did not agree with the location of the parkland that was proposed. Staff reviewed these application or these concerns that was outlined. And at the public meeting, there was a great deal of opposition regarding the rezoning and the application to create an additional 17 single detached dwelling lots. A lot of the residents felt that this would create a significant traffic concern. So when we heard those concerns, we spoke again to the city engineer, and it was his opinion that 17 additional single detached dwelling lots would not be enough to compromise the design and traffic volumes on a local street. Another concern raised by residents was the park, and that was also reviewed by Parks and Recreation, and that piece of parkland was actually determined by Parks and Recreation, I believe back in 2017 when the first application came forward for the remaining balance of the land. And Parks and Recreation felt that that was the most appropriate piece of parkland to take for the subdivision, because it was adjacent to an already existing piece of land that they owned, and it was also adjacent to the school property. So that would allow connectivity between the subdivision at this end of the subdivision to the school property. So in planning practice, when assessing locations that are appropriate for residential uses, it's optimal to locate residential dwellings in locations close to amenities, transit, parkland, and schools, and within walkable neighborhoods. This proposed site, it's within walking distance to a school, parkland, and public transit's also accessible. There's various sections in the official plan that support this type of density within a low-density subdivision. This is low-density development. We would not consider this medium or high density, and we have outlined the sections in the official plan that support the application. We've also listed within the report a list of shortcomings and positive attributes and neutral attributes related to the application. I'm sure you've all reviewed that. So given the demand for housing and the low vacancy rate, it's staff's opinion that allowing this portion of the subdivision to be rezoned to R1N makes good planning sense, and it's an efficient use of the land. So we are supporting the application to rezone to R1N. If there's any questions, I can answer them.
Thank you very much, Laurel, for your presentation. Do I have any comments, concerns? Mr. Paul Connolly.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I understand when someone submits a proposal for approval of a subdivision, I know there are some requirements around allotting a certain percentage of the land for park space and the like. Is there not a similar requirement around sidewalks as well?
That's a great question.
Would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead, Laurel, yeah.
So I'll answer that to the best of my ability, because I'm not the manager of public works. But within the city's road profile requirements and requirements for road construction, there is no requirement for sidewalks. So the city does not currently request that the developers build the sidewalks. They do, however, request that the road right-of-way is large enough to be able to accommodate future sidewalks and any infrastructure should the city wish to build those at a later date. Generally, within local subdivisions with local roads, it doesn't really warrant the profile, like the road profile, to include sidewalks, because those roads are generally lower traffic, lower speeds, where you would include sidewalks in areas where you have traffic that moves at a faster speed and busier streets.
Thank you very much, Laurel. And just to add to that, so the process is under works where we're requesting that the developers do look after this, develop it in the future. It's a very complicated process that's in, but it is in there that the developer should be responsible for the infrastructure, water, sewer. You know, they're the ones making the money. And you know, when this was decided upon, the price of concrete and supplies weren't like it is today, and the city is certainly pushing for that to go forward, and so it's expected to come out of the taxpayers' dollars. So it is very expensive, and you know, we still have subdivisions all over the city that still don't have sidewalks that we really would like to see. Even the mode of transportation, the traffic, the speed of everyone, and that includes our own, you know, people in our own subdivisions. Everyone, it's the world we're in. Everyone's in a race. So there is a need for you know, especially the you know, the initial streets coming into a subdivision. You know, certainly could use some sidewalks and speed bumps or whatever it is to help with to curb that activity. But a good question, Paul. Yeah. So, but it is in process of requesting for that, and thank you very much for the question, and thank you, Laurel, for the answer. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Mr. Bob Kenny.
At the public meeting there last week, Mr. Durand, the developer, he indicated he would put in a sidewalk at his own expense. Where was that going to be located? In this area?
I believe it was going to be Hummingbird, the main drag going in, I think is where he was suggesting. But he did mention that some property space, some of the residents' property might have to be taken up with some of the, I don't know if that's where that is, but he did make that comment. But that's what he had stated. But Laurel, do you want to finish up on that?
Yes, and I should see clarification on that with him as well. But I believe that he was talking about constructing the subdivision within this new, or the sidewalk, I'm sorry, within this new portion of the subdivision, so that when he would be constructing the street, it would go in there. And that isn't a requirement under the bylaw, but he did offer to do that.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. And, you know, I appreciated when the developer mentioned putting the sidewalk in, because that's very important to me too, that we start making that part of the requirement with new subdivisions moving forward, as you know. But I did hear from a lot of residents in some of the bigger concerns that were brought up were the, one lady spoke about the fact that this property was already rezoned to R2. And as it's 75% developed, here we are back again for another planning public consultation meeting to go again now one step further to go to R1N. And I know the developers are in it to make money, but these homeowners have invested in their properties. And when they went in, it was with a very clear understanding that, yes, they knew there was 29 more lots to be developed, but that was what they were okay with. Another lady spoke, and I thought it was an interesting point when she said, you know, he was talking about affordable housing at $450,000 or selling a property at $700,000, and she made the comment that if she had the lot, she could build a $450,000 house if that's what she could afford. For me, along with the fact that it is considered one of the shortcomings by planning staff, that additional lots were not contemplated in the subdivision plan for the neighborhood, I won't be supporting this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCabe. Resident Member Basil Hambley.
What is, excuse me, Chair, through the Chair, what is the lot size that's required on the width of the lots when it's an R1N?
Laurel, you got that?
Yeah, just let me grab that in the
Yes,
bylaw,
yeah.
but I believe it's 39 feet and just a moment, I just want to make sure I'm correct.
It does say somewhere.
So an interior lot, the lot frontage is 34.8 feet, and that's for a single detached dwelling. And with the current zone, which is also for single detached dwellings, the lot frontage is 59.1 feet. I don't believe the developer is going to the frontage is 34.8 feet, but I would have to clarify that. But he's worked it out that there would be an additional 17 lots. So some of them would probably meet that minimum requirement, and then some of the other lots would be a little wider.
So if the lot is 34, so even 35 feet, and it's, my understanding it's 6 feet between the house and the property line is the minimum?
It would be, the side yard setback is 6 feet to each from the house to the property boundary, and then the other house would be 6 feet. So it's 12 feet between dwellings. That's the same as in the R1S zone or the R1L zone.
Right.
Same requirement for side yard setback. It's
So
just
that-
your frontage is narrower.
So that would leave approximately a house no more than 23 feet wide.
Yeah, so they are narrow frontage
for some of
homes,
them.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think you stated that they were around 1,100 square feet. But I think that's what he had said there, yeah. Yep. Any other concerns, comments? Anybody? Oh, Councillor Yankoff.
Thank you, Chair. When I spoke at the public meeting, my concerns were very similar to Councillor McCabe's, and I understood the frustration of the residents with the subdivision nearly 75% complete, going from 29 up to 46 seemed like a big ask, and so for that reason, I won't be supporting the recommendation for the
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Yankoff. Okay, anybody else got any other comments, concerns, questions? I see none. Okay, so the request is to rezone the remaining land in the subdivision for single detached residential small R1S to single detached residential narrow R1N to permit the subdivision of 46 lots for single detached dwellings. That's the recommendation, so I'll need a mover and a seconder for this file. I mean, so there's, just to be clear, I guess, so you have, it's either yes or no, right? The staff's recommendation is to move it forward, so we would either say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't. So a motion needs to go to that effect.
Could there be instead a different motion?
We could probably entertain a different motion.
Could I put a motion on the floor that we move to reject this application?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
if
my motion,
Okay, the
to
motion.
reject this application.
Okay, motion on the floor is to reject this staff's recommendation. And we have a seconder, Councillor McCabe. Any other comments, concerns on the motion? I see none. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those against the of the motion? 1, 2, 3. So it's 5-3 to reject the request from staff. Okay? Thank you very much. You got that on?
A clarification,
Yes.
does that still move on to council?
I
does.
believe so. Yes, it would. Yes, yes. Okay. So just to clarify that, so the motion from planning staff will be to reject. Planning board, I mean, yeah, sorry, planning staff and planning board is to reject. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 50 Cumberland Street, PID number 679381, and Laurel, you're on the floor again. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a request to proceed to public consultation to amend a development concept plan in the comprehensive development area zone for the construction of an industrial equipment building on lands owned by Maritime Electric. The The uses listed in Appendix B in the Zoning and Development Bylaw is currently an industrial equipment building utility power plant. So the appendix will have to be amended to reflect that. The request is to allow the construction of a new industrial building. The application involves the demolition of the existing steam plant and the steam stacks. And Section 44.25 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw requires that amendments to a development concept plan be approved by council. And that amendment or approval process, it must be treated as if it was an amendment to the Zoning and Development Bylaw, which will require notification to property owners within 100 meters. The bylaw also requires that the working site plan and buildings also be approved on the recommendation of Planning Board. And the developer is submitting a site plan and architectural drawings for the requested building and at this time. So the approval will be for the review and approval of the actual architectural drawings currently. So the site is at 50 Cumberland Street, right here. This is actually the best site plan we have. The other site plan is more technical, so it's a little harder for the board to see the general layout of the site. The access to the site, it's at the base of Richmond Street, which would be right here. The total acreage for the Maritime Electric site, it's approximately 28.8 acres. It consists of 14 land parcels and 4 water lots. The proposed building will be located on PID number 679381, which is 2.41 acres. And it's bounded to the north by Grafton Street. I'll just go back. It's bounded to the north by Grafton Street, to the east by land zone CDA, to the south by CDA zone lands and Water Street, and to the west by R3 medium density residential and institutional zone lands in Cumberland Street. The steam building currently houses equipment for Maritime Electric's 50 megawatt combustion turbine generator, and the equipment will be moved to the new building once the steam plant has been demolished. The new building is 2.5 stories, or 2 stories actually. These are the elevations. So it's 25 feet high, it's 55 feet wide, and 65 feet long. Maritime Electric has indicated that the construction of this building will be in 2 phases. The first phase is slated for this fall, and the second phase would proceed in December of 2022 to November of 2023. They've also submitted a stormwater control plan, which was developed by CBCL for the project. And one thing we might want to point out is that over the past few years, Maritime Electric has implemented a tree planting plan, which is, they've planted approximately 100 new trees to create a landscape buffer around the property. The existing steam plant that's located along Cumberland Street, it does have a significant industrial presence along the streetscape, and the west side of Cumberland Street is zoned downtown neighborhood. Properties along this portion of the street, they consist of single detached, semi-detached, and converted dwellings. The area on this side of the street for the most part is low density residential, and demolition of that steam plant will open up this area of Cumberland Street and will provide more buffering between the industrial use and the low density neighborhood because the building will be moved further back on the property. Maritime Electric was identified when the Eastern Gateway Plan was done, and it was identified as a long-term industrial land use. It was recognized that the official plan and the Eastern Gateway Plan that discussed Maritime Electric, they indicated that Maritime Electric would continue with that industrial land use in the area. So even though the 500 lot plan was developed, there was no intention to stop that use within the area. So therefore, given that it was identified and talked about and built into the 500 lot plan and the official plan, there's policies in the official plan that support the Maritime Electric plant continuing in the area. Staff feel that the application is in line with the official plan and the 500 lot plan, and we're recommending that the proposal advance to public consultation. So if there's any questions.
Good. Thank you very much, Laurel. Any comments, concerns on this one? Councillor Yanko.
And if it's okay with you, could I defer the question to?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you, and thank you for that report. Did Maritime Electric give any indication that they would be mindful of their rebuild with green energy in mind and just thinking of the environment going forward? I realize it's their property, and I'm just wondering if they had given any indication to that.
That's a question that should be directed to them. But what they did indicate to me was that they're continuing with the tree planting plan. They would be buffering the site along Cumberland Street when the steam plant comes down. The new building will be more energy efficient. It's going to house the turbine generator, and even the steam stacks. I know I worked on a project with Maritime Electric a number of years ago when they put the 50 megawatt generator in there, and there was a lot of talk that years ago, I don't know if it's so much now, but people used to come out and their cars would be covered with soot from the steam stacks. So I think removal of those stacks, even though they do have quite a presence on the skyline in Charlottetown, will probably be much more environmentally friendly than the current situation.
Good. Thank you very much. Good question. Shalom Murray.
Just one comment on that. Just any building that goes through the permit process now has to meet the National Energy Code as well, so it will have to meet those sustainable requirements.
Thank you very much. Very good point. As part of the Eastern Gateway, they're very committed to, because we're very much pushing to have that area green, and someday, and we might not be around, but they were very much a part of that, and I think their goal is to be a good neighbor and provide a very important service that we can't go without. So I do know that they're very on board with green energy as much as they can go at this time. Any other comments, concerns, questions? Councillor McCabe.
I'm just going to move that we support staff's recommendation and proceed to public consultation.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. Any other discussion on the motion? None. Okay, I'll need a vote. All those in favor? That includes everyone. Okay, no naysayers in this one. So we'll move on. Thank you very much, Laurel. Number 7, 257 Mount Edward Road, PID 390674. 261 Mount Edward Road, PID number 390682. 265 Mount Edward Road, PID 390708, and 269 Mount Edward Road, PIN numbers 390757, and PID number 390690. Request to proceed to a public meeting. Laurel.
Okay, so this is an application to proceed to public consultation for approval of a development concept plan, a rezoning, an official plan amendment, and approval of a lot consolidation. The area in question is outlined in gray. You can see right there. And the bylaw requires that the working site plan and buildings also be approved on the recommendation of planning board. So even though this is being submitted for the rezoning and development concept plan approval at this time, when this application comes back for building permit approval, the building plans will have to come back to the board for approval. So the property in question, it's approximately 10.97 acres. It's bounded to the north by CDA zone land owned by the Board of Governors of St. Dunstan's, to the east by Mount Edward Road, to the south by additional CDA zone land, and to the west by the Confederation Trail. The proposal is for 5 multi-unit apartment buildings with underground parking, and the apartment buildings are proposed to range in heights from 4 to 6 stories. Topography on the site is higher at Mount Edward Road, and according to the design brief provided by the applicant's consultant, there is a 12-meter grade change from the lowest portion on the west side of the site to the highest portion on the east near Mount Edward Road. So it falls from Mount Edward Road back towards Confederation Trail. It's higher here and then lower down here. So the 6-story buildings are shown to be located at the back of the site, and the 4-story buildings are located closer to Mount Edward Road. And this is a site plan just showing more of the landscaping and where the buildings will be located and parking, etc. The total proposed unit count for apartment buildings is 344 units. So Building A is to house 90 units, Building B 28 units, Building C 28 units, Building D 114 units, and Building E 84 units. Staff would note that there is no density requirement in the CDA zone. However, if staff were to apply a calculation for density in the R4 apartment residential zone, 385 apartment units would be permitted on the site. The concept plan also proposes 4 stacked townhouses with a total unit count of 26 units along Mount Edward Road. So right along here, and the existing dwellings that are currently along Mount Edward Road would be demolished to accommodate these. Parking for the townhouses is to the rear of the buildings. Individual driveways are not proposed to access Mount Edward Road. So instead, one central access from Mount Edward Road is proposed to serve the townhouses. This central access will also serve the apartment buildings, and access to the apartment buildings will be temporary from Mount Edward Road. A new public road will be constructed to allow for adequate frontage for the apartment buildings. So this road here is proposed to be constructed. Driveways will be constructed off of that road to the apartment buildings to provide lot frontage. So that north-south connector was part of the traffic master plan for the area, and that was identified last year when that master plan was completed. That north-south connector will continue on through the lands to the south towards Towers Road, and also north towards the St. Dunstan's land. So once that road is constructed, only the townhouses will have access from Mount Edward Road, and that access to the apartment buildings will be cut off from Mount Edward Road. Subdivision of those lots would be permitted once the public road is constructed, and given that the site is to be subdivided, parkland dedication would be required. A parkland parcel has been proposed adjacent to the Confederation Trail, right here, and that parkland parcel does show stormwater management ponds on the site. There's also a central park space between the buildings right here. The zoning and development bylaw requires 10% parkland or 10% value in cash in lieu for land that's subdivided. So Parks and Recreation, they will have to assess the proposed parkland and give a recommendation prior to the concept plan being finalized. The proposal was sent to Parks and Recreation for review. So when we hear back from them, we can recommend on that further. The proposal is located within walking distance to bus routes, the Confederation Trail, shopping, and amenities. And in planning practice, when assessing locations that are appropriate for residential uses, it's appropriate to locate residential dwellings in locations close to amenities, transit, parkland, and schools within walkable neighborhoods. This area of Mount Edward Road is in close proximity to all those uses. Charlottetown is currently experiencing a housing crisis, as we're all aware, and the vacancy rate is at an all-time low of 1.5%. And many residents are being forced to leave the city because of lack of housing, or they're just not able to obtain affordable housing. So there's many sections in the official plan that support this type of density and in a location like this in the city. I've listed those within the report for your review, and I've also listed the positive shortcomings and neutral attributes within the report. So staff feel this report has merit, or this proposal has merit, and we are recommending that the application proceed to public consultation. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Thank you very much, and we'll start with Councillor Yankoff.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Laurel, for your report. I just have one question, and I'm just a bit perplexed at why we would head to public consultation before we have all the information, and the information that we appear not to have yet is what Parks and Recreation and Leisure feel is appropriate in terms of the 10% of parkland dedication. That question is bound to come up at the public consultation meeting, and we still don't have it. So why wouldn't we just wait until we have that and then go to public consultation? Then we have everything we need to present. It's just a question.
Yes, I think that will have to be determined before we proceed to public consultation. So if we don't get that answer this month, then it would have to be wait till the next month for the public meeting. But we do need to know that for sure. Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, thank you very much, both Elena and Laurel. And you could also add, I guess, for me, my concern would be snow removal in the winter. We have some delicate land at the bottom of these lots, and I'd be curious to see what their plans are for snow removal. I know they have the stormwater pond there, but it serves a purpose that I don't know if the snow will over impact it or not. And of course, we have the lovely trail at the end there. So just that'd be something else I'd be curious to have answered as well, on where they plan on putting the snow, because it's a big piece of property. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Mr. Chair?
Rosemary.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'll let Rosemary go,
Yes,
then
please.
we'll go to you. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Rosemary.
All right. So I have a major concern about the traffic, and Laurel, I think that you indicated, thanks for your report, by the way, but I think you indicated there's a total of 344 new apartments, and all of the apartment traffic is accessing onto Tower Road. And did I understand that correctly?
Well, it will also access onto Spencer Drive, but this area, there was a traffic master plan done for this area, and at that time, they anticipated the amount of density for the area. So the traffic engineers, when they looked at this area of the city, they developed the plan based on how to handle the density and what type of roads would need to be extended, and with what would have to be built in order to accommodate the density that's going to occur on these parcels, as well as the parcels to the north and south.
I feel that, and before we bring this forward to the public, I think the city needs to indicate to the public what that master plan is. I know that we had a public meeting about the master plan. I was there, a number of us were there. But I think this is going to be a huge issue that's going to come up at a public meeting. How is the traffic going to be managed? Because Tower Road can't manage all of that traffic from 344 new apartment buildings. And I think in conjunction with presenting this, we should have that whole infrastructure piece needs to be presented as well. Timelines, when is that Spencer Drive extension going to happen?
Well, that Spencer Drive extension was actually deeded to the city. It's under the city's ownership. The road parcel was deeded by Pan American Properties to the city. As per the manager of Public Works, I believe he indicated that they're looking at doing construction on this road next year. So, I mean, that's a question that should be answered by him, but in conversations, that is the indication that this road network would be constructed in tandem with these developments.
Thank you, Laurel. And I guess, I just feel that I can't support this until we have that information included with the proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Acting CAO, Donna Waddell. Thank you very much. Paul Conley.
Do we know who RYCH Investments Inc. is?
I believe one of the applicants is Ryan Pino. I'm not sure who all is involved with this application, but that's the company name that come in.
Laurel?
I believe one of the applicants is Ryan Pino, and I'm not sure who all is involved with that company. It was also the applicant that's handling it is a consulting firm, which is Fathom Architecture out of, or Planning and Design out of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Paul and Laurel. Mr. Hambley, you want to go next? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my concern is along the same lines as Rosemary's is where these roads would be heading. Because if we look at the plan, it looks to be connecting into where the St. Martha's Court is. And I'm thinking that there's possibly already a building being built there now.
No, that's incorrect. It will connect to St. Martha's Court, but the building is not being built where the road connector is. The road connector is planned to connect to St. Martha's Court. It's also planned to connect to the south towards Towers Road and Spencer Drive.
Okay.
Yeah, so Spencer Drive will come up from Canadian Tire.
Will
Right.
extend.
And then extend up to Mount Everett Road. Just
Right.
Okay, and that'll feed off Spencer Drive.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Yankoff.
But to Rosemary's point, I don't think we've adopted the traffic plan yet. We've received it at council, but we don't have timelines or anything around that overarching traffic plan. So to her, to kind
Her
of build on her
concern.
comment, I can imagine that we are not going to be able to answer the questions of residents at a public consultation meeting because they're still going to be asking the same questions of that overarching traffic plan, perhaps?
Yeah, you're right. I know we did accept it. And with this development, we might have to do the same on Fern Garden as we were going to do on Ash. And that is to prevent the traffic from flowing up through that subdivision as well. But I'm not sure if that traffic study, according to Laurel, I think it does include all this. So I'm not sure where we want to go. And I might ask Acting CEO Donna Waddell to kind of give her guidance on this one. So Donna, in your recollection, have we approved that?
I think you've approved it in principle because that it knows that I'm expecting that's what you did because that's what you used to
Yeah.
do is approve
Yeah.
in principle. But I think what I would suggest, Mr. Chair, we do is in the package, we'd put more information on where these roads were going to be connected to. And secondly, we would have at the public meeting a copy of the West Royalty Master Plan, and we'd ask the Public Works Manager to come and address it so that those questions can be resolved.
That sounds like a good plan. I think there's going to be a lot of questions concerning the traffic for sure, and I think our concerns are warranted for sure. So, Councillor McCabe.
I think that's a great idea because I thought that we were still going to revisit and have another public consultation based on the revised plan that happened. I thought that there was, after our initial public meeting, there was information that they listened to the residents, that they were going to revise that traffic plan, correct me if I'm wrong, and that we were going to go back to another public engagement process, is what I understood was going to happen with that plan.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think Mr. Adams did answer those questions from the public meeting on the traffic plan, but I can't. Yeah, it's vague. But at least if we have the traffic engineer there, Mr. Adams, at the same time, I think we can kind of kill two birds with the one stone, and the residents can hear it right from the engineer's mouth as to where the roads are exactly going to come in and out of, and have a presentation on that. And if the traffic plan needs to be approved, well, that'll be a separate thing that'll have to be done as this project goes forward. Is everybody okay with that? I think that's, yeah, but there will be lots of concerns. Councillor Yankoff.
I guess just as long as we know that the overall traffic study and plan is done in tandem or prior to approving this project.
Exactly.
So that the residents know exactly where the traffic is coming in and out.
Yep.
And there's no kind of last minute surprises for the residents.
No, and that's what's good about the public meeting, right? We'll address those concerns for sure at the public meeting, so that the residents and council and planning board have a better, clear picture on the traffic.
And the
Okay.
parkland clarified.
Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
And the parkland clarified by Parks and Rec.
And that should be done before we actually go to the public meeting, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yes,
So
we
we
hope.
are waiting on that.
Right, okay, and they probably will meet before the public meeting, I'm sure. Okay. Okay, so we,
Actually, Parks
sorry.
and Rec will not be meeting before our monthly meeting of council.
no, but the public meeting,
Right.
Before we schedule a public
the
meeting.
public meeting, they'll have an answer to us, right?
Well, we didn't have a Parks and Recreation meeting this month
Mhm.
because there was no agenda items. So therefore, the next Parks and Rec meeting won't be until after July the 11th.
Right.
And usually right after the public, or right after the council meeting, we have to get the public meeting scheduled by a certain time frame, and it wouldn't be time before the next Parks and Recreation meeting, I don't think.
Yeah, well, I think maybe in this case, because we have to go to a public meeting on it, that Public Works have a meeting, or that Parks and Rec have a meeting, and
Or if we didn't have the necessary information, we would just delay it for another month. Just depending on what happens with the information on the traffic master plan and the Parks and Rec. If we need to do that, we could do that, but we wanted to get this forward so that, we had
Get it into
in the
motion.
queue to go to a public meeting.
Yeah. Okay. We got a couple of things to do, maybe tidy up there, but, we do got to move these things forward, but at the same time, residents' concerns got to be addressed, and so we'll make sure that Mr. Adams, the traffic engineer, will be at this meeting to discuss those things, and hopefully we'll have the Parks and Rec before we go to the public meeting, and it could even be maybe once Parks and Rec look at it, maybe there could be an email vote even from their committee suggesting whether or not they like the idea of where the green space is. So saying that, the request is to proceed, the recommendation from staff to go to a public meeting. Do I have a motion? Moved by Paul Conley. I need a seconder, Shalyn Murray, that we go to a public meeting. Any other discussion on it? See none? All those in favor of the public meeting? Yeah. Good, that's, Bobby, you in favor? You in favor? I didn't quite see, sorry. Yeah, I'm a little slow getting ahead of it. Okay, that's great, everyone's in favor of going to a public meeting.
And that's providing we have
Providing we have the information from
on the
Parks and Rec.
parkland and any other information we need, and confirmation that Mr. Adams is available on the date of a public consultation meeting to even
Exactly,
attend.
he has to be there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, so moving on to C, number 8 on the agenda, zoning and development bylaw, PHZD.2, proposed amendments to the zoning development bylaw in relation to permitting pool covers to replace fence requirements. I believe Alex is away, so Laurel, I assume you're here?
Yes. So my screen just changed from the presentation, and I can see everyone on my screen now. Oh, yes, there isn't actually a presentation for this. Good point, Ellen. So I'm going to wing this because this isn't my application, and I've reviewed this to the best of my ability. But basically, this is to bring this bylaw amendment to a public consultation. The request is to amend the bylaw, section 4.3, to allow certified pool covers as opposed to fencing around swimming pools. So we did have a request from a property owner to amend the bylaw to build in these certified pool covers that are supposed to replace fences and are as sturdy to support a person if they were to fall into the pool. It would protect them from actually falling in the pool, but would support them and not cause a drowning. So the cost of these pool covers apparently is in line with what it would cost to put a fence around the property. And there has been some jurisdictions, Mr. Forbes has done quite a bit of research on this, and there have been some jurisdictions in Canada that have adopted these pool covers as opposed to fencing a pool. Alberta was one place, but there are some difficulties with them because they have to be rated. And what he's outlined in the report is that planning staff don't really have the expertise to be able to rate these pool covers and go out and inspect them. And so it's at this point, we're not really sure what the insurance regulations would be, what liability issues could be. And he did seek information from Red Cross, who handles swimming programs, and he hasn't received any feedback from them yet. So generally, like within our department, building inspectors don't deal with pool covers. They're not covered under the National Building Code, and it's not something that planning staff would generally review. So when we get an application in now for a swimming pool, it's basically to erect a fence. So that's a very easy thing for us to review and pass a recommendation on and issue a permit for. We basically look to see if the fence meets the height requirements, if it's secure and safe, and it's easy to sign off on a permit. Something with the pool covers where they have specific safety standards, we don't have the expertise to do that. However, he has listed in his report quite a bit of information and what some jurisdictions do to review these pool covers, and they've actually broken it out from their zoning and development bylaw, and they have a separate bylaw for swimming pools. So the safety standards that are covered, or that cover these, are ASTM F1346, and he's outlined some information in the report on those safety standards. I'm not sure if you've read it or not, but there is quite a bit of information there. What he's identified is there could be legal risks, which he would like to have city solicitor review in more detail should we go to public consultation. And what has been recommended is an indemnity clause. When you're, if we were to approve the pool covers and someone were to come in and apply to have a pool cover as opposed to a fence, what he's recommending is that we would have to have someone sign an indemnity clause and an agreement with the city. However, it's unclear at this point if the homeowner were to sell their home, if that indemnity clause and agreement would transfer to the next owner. So that has to be clarified legally. He's outlined a number of options that if this goes to public consultation, following public consultation, what should proceed before we adopt a bylaw. So option one would be direct staff to work with our legal advisors to prepare the proposed amendments to the zoning and development bylaw, and to prepare a separate swimming pool bylaw to permit property owners who wish to install a certified pool cover and the option to waive the requirement to erect a fence or around the pool. Option two would be to replace required fencing for swimming pools, and in those instances where a certified pool cover is provided, be reviewed by a third-party expert who could advise the city on the safety implications of removing the fencing requirement and provide the industry standard as to how the proposed amendment could be drafted. This expert report would also recommend the safety standard code that should be applied to the pool cover to ensure that the appropriate standard is referenced and adhered to. Option 3, that the proposed amendments to the zoning and development bylaw as it pertains to section 4.3 dealing with swimming pools to permit property owners who install a certified pool cover the option to waive the requirement to erect a fence around the pool be approved. And option 4, that the proposed amendments to the zoning and development bylaw as it pertains to section 4.3 dealing with swimming pools to permit property owners who install a certified pool cover the option to waive the requirement to erect a fence around the pool be denied. So those are the 4 options following public consultation that the board and council will have to defer on. So the recommendation is to proceed to public consultation to get feedback from the public, and following the feedback from the public, we would have to proceed with one of those 4 options. So if there's anything I can answer.
Thank you very
I'm
much,
happy.
Laurel. So as you can see by the amount of information here, this has been a complicated file for sure. Some council, have residents that want to do this, and it's not cheap. They're probably more than a fence, even at today's fence price. So, moving forward, I think we need to include the public now at this point so that they're aware of just how complicated it is. Like, there's some, if you talk to some, they'll say, well, you just got to change your bylaw, but it's not that easy. As you see, there's a lot of information that needs to be discussed, and I think it's important that the public become aware of that, not only for someone that wants to put a pool cover on, but also for those that might be interested in installing them or inspecting them. I'm not sure how many companies around Charlottetown or PEI that would have that ability to do that. So again, there needs to be some more communication, especially to the public on this. There are some municipalities that have done it here, and there's some good ideas, and having a separate bylaw probably does make sense, but I think we can save that for the public meeting and get Alex to give this presentation when he's there, and then we can move forward. That's my 2 cents worth. Any comments, questions? Rosemary Herbert, ladies first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question about whether we could include some research for the public meeting about safety, comparison of safety and prevention of drownings between a fence and a pool cover. I think all our concern, everybody here collectively, would be around prevention of drownings, especially for children. And I would be interested in knowing, is there a difference or are they comparable before we make a decision on that?
See, that is some of the things that he outlined in his report, and it's outside of staff's area of expertise. So that is why Mr. Forbes consulted with the Red Cross, which he hasn't received a response back on. One thing that was noted within the report is that a lot of times these pool covers are more beneficial to the homeowner as far as safety, because if you have a child in the home, then the child wanders out, gets on the pool cover, they're less likely to fall in, whereas fencing, for the most part, protects your property from people entering your property and going into the pool cover. One of the things that was outlined in the report is that, okay, you have a pool cover on your pool, but what if you forget to close the pool cover? It's late at night, you just get out of the pool, you go in the house, forget about the pool cover. Accidents happen. I mean, people, miss things. It's less likely that someone is going to get in through a fence or a locked gate than they are, they're going to, for the most part, your property's fenced and the gate is closed if you have a pool, as opposed to you have to consciously pull that pool cover over or, activate whatever mechanism pulls this cover back. So there's things like that have to be considered, and one of the things that he outlined in the report is who in the department is qualified or will be qualified to be able to assess these situations, and how many times would we have to inspect them to make sure that they're up to code so that if something were to happen, the liability doesn't fall on the city. So those are things that have to be answered by our legal counsel, and you know, it may also even involve additional staff training if we decide to go this route.
And just to clarify, I think these particular covers would be mechanical. They're like a garage door, except they're parallel, and you just press the remote and it shuts, right? So that's the pro side of the cover, you know, what the argument is made. And of course, the other side is the fact that, well, a fence, you know, it does kind of give you that security feature that from an insurance point of view. But we also heard that insurance companies are saying these things are okay. So but there's a lot of information here to be thrown into the ring, and we all got to kind of listen. But I mean, it wouldn't hurt to make sure we read fully through that. That's a lot of information for us to kind of absorb. As you can see, it's a big file. But moving forward, I think, you know, again, the more the public is aware of what this file is and what it's about, I think is a good thing. So, Bob Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think before the public needs to be made aware, I think we need to be made aware. When I read this report, I'm totally confused. Can I ask a few questions? Sure. What is a certified pool cover?
Well,
and who certifies it?
well, that's a good question. The standardization part is what has Alex asking questions. And just before I give it over to Laurel, but that's part of the equation is what is going to be considered to be the standard pool cover that that the bylaw will cover. You know, there's so many out there, right? So that's something that's got to be decided upon as well. And of course, we're getting back to what we just said about servicing it and inspecting it. You know, who's going to be qualified. So anything else, Laurel? Go ahead.
No, I mean, just what's indicated in the report. There's a ASTM F1346 standard, and I believe that from what I know of it, the pool companies would have to, if they're selling these pool covers, would have to follow that standard. But what it boils down to is in our department, who's going to be responsible for inspecting them and making sure that they do meet that standard when we issue a permit.
If I can, Bob, in the Chilliwack one there's a pretty good explanation of their interpretation of the rules and the safety cover performance specifications, and they actually talk about ASTM, and it's an international fixed destination, and so it's pretty deep, right? Yeah, you have to really sit.
But the important point that's missing is that it doesn't speak to the specific safety of automatic pool systems versus fences, right?
And that's why Alex is hoping to get a little more legal for the public meeting, that he'll have more of a legal aspect on that.
But a few more things we need.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. It's talking about designed to prevent people from drowning in a swimming pool when closed. But what one's left open? Okay.
That's a good
and
question.
There doesn't appear to be any organization that provides any formal certification. Am I right on that, Laurel?
That I can't answer because I didn't do the research on this. I'm reading the report.
I just did some Googling, but I couldn't find anything. In the bottom paragraph on page 1, it talks about one of the applicants is talking about the security of their family members. And my point is, this is not just about their family members. This is a neighborhood safety issue. Okay?
Yeah.
And also, people who want to have a view and therefore want to do away with the fence and just have a pool cover, is this about aesthetics or is this about safety?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit of both, depending on where the pool is. I know one of the applicants, it's in the wooded area, so I don't think they're too concerned about the aesthetics. But then there are some that I think they are quite concerned. But at the end of the day, the pool cover, you know, from an operation point of view, theoretically you can drive a car on them. Like it's, you know, they're heavy duty. They're not something that someone's going to fall in when you're not using it.
If they're closed.
But that's a great question. When it is being used, what does the insurance company say then, right? But if there isn't a fence, but
Okay.
go ahead. Any more?
No, I'm not far from finished.
Okay, go ahead, couple
Okay.
more, keep a couple more.
People have installed pools without fences. This is not about the bylaw, but but looking to change the bylaw, but rather it's ignoring the bylaw. And now they're coming after the fact to get it changed. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess every bylaw, there's somebody breaking it, right? Rule and regulation, but in general, we're pretty good. We have an ongoing file there now that's been open for a couple of years, and we're hoping to deal with that.
And we've been asked to send this off to public consultation. On page 2, it says, seek input from the Red Cross, city insurance provider, and the city's legal team before providing an opinion. Going back to Alana's comment earlier about needing the information before we even pass it on, I think that applies here as well. I don't think we have enough information. And also, installing the cover to a certain standard doesn't obligate the homeowner to close the cover. There's no obligation there. Is there? Is there going to be any routine inspections to make sure these pool covers are closed?
I think in some of them, the bylaw states that it has to be inspected, but yeah, it's, again, that's why I think most of your questions would be answered if we went to a public meeting, because we're gonna have all the players in the room at the same time, and the questions can be answered, right? I mean, hopefully we'll have a legal, and hopefully we'll have just Alex is away, and that's the only reason he's not here to present tonight, but, you know, I think he's got some answers, he's just waiting for the Red Cross to get back to him. But to be, you know, at the same time, you know, there are people who've been waiting for some time to put these in, and it's just, we've been sitting on it and sitting on it and sitting on it, but I think it's time that, I think there is some movement from council that we'd like to deal with it one way or another, and if we don't, you know, keep the ball rolling on this, I know legal has been in to speak to us, and I think Julie's itching to say something there, but
I'm not finished.
they are, you know, there is, legal has gave us some green light that it can be done. A bylaw could be adopted, so we're not shying away from that legal aspect. I think there is answers for that.
But again, that's something else that's missing from this report.
Yeah, but I think Laurel mentioned in the report that that Alex is waiting on, you know, you just can't call up legal and get a request, you know, them fellows are got months ahead of their work, ahead of themselves, so, but he's hoping, you know, Alex, I think wouldn't put a public meeting on if he didn't think that these answers are going to be readily available at the time of the public meeting.
The insurance is a big issue. I would think there'd be a significant increase in liability insurance to the city if you're talking indemnities.
Well, I mean, they would have to sign off on these, you know, that the city would not be responsible.
They can sign off all they want.
You know.
The first thing people do when there's an accident like that, they sue everybody, right? And if someone goes bankrupt, then it goes to the next person.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. Listen, I'm not arguing with you.
No, what I'm saying though is that I find it hard to pass this off to a public meeting when there's so much information missing, and I'm not comfortable with it. I'll have no part in it.
Yeah, I'm chair of the meeting. If that's where the board wants to go, I'm quite content.
I'm done.
Thank you very much, Mr.
You're
Kenny.
welcome.
Councillor McCabe.
And they're great points, for sure. Thank you, Bobby, because, you know, you don't think of every issue, for sure. And that's why I'm okay with going to a public consultation, just to get all these ideas, because it's been back and forth. It's like a ping pong ball. But I do know that planning staff has a lot of concerns about being responsible for this bylaw, which makes me concerned. And even when I look at Chilliwack's, the authority to inspect is the building inspector, has the authority to inspect. And we know our building inspectors are maxed with trying to make sure our buildings are kept up to code, let alone trying to add another piece to our building inspectors to go and look at safety covers for swimming pools that they're not qualified to look at. So there's lots of things. I know people want answers and they want them fast, but we want to make sure we do it right.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I think, again, like I said at the start, once people get all that information, you know, it doesn't look like City Hall is dragging their heels on it. Like it's a complicated file, and there needs to be a lot of questions answered. So one good way is to have a public meeting, right? I mean, we're not making, a public meeting doesn't mean we're making a decision. We're just bringing it to the table so that we can have a roundhouse discussion and include the residents pro and against, you know, and we can listen to those arguments, and I'm sure there'll be other questions that Bob Kenny had mentioned. So I believe someone on this side had a question. Paul Conley.
It just seems to me, Mr. Chair, that there's an awful lot of unknown factors here. And I mean, to follow up on Julie's comment about building inspectors, I mean, they're certified to inspect buildings, but they're not, there would have to be a whole new certification process for them to take on that responsibility. And Bob's point about the code of standard for the cover, you know, I'm sure that there's all different grades of codes that might apply. It just seems to me, the other question I have is, I'd be very surprised if there's a significant groundswell of concern about this particular issue. I mean, how many people have come forward with?
I think there's half a dozen.
Is there?
That's looking, and it's big money, right? It's not something that a young family would be, you know, you're talking 30,000, 40,000 range for some of these covers. So it's serious money. So yeah, but there is a few requests in, yeah, and there's a few waiting to see what we're doing as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Yankoff, I believe next. Did Rosemary, you have your hand? No. Councilor Yankoff.
Thank you, Chair. If there are a half a dozen, I tend to agree with Councilor McCabe. A lot of these questions potentially could be asked and answered or discussed with the public's help and through a consultation. When you mentioned that these are high-end, expensive covers, this could very well, something that could be added in is that if you do opt out of a fence and you opt into this certified pool cover, that the cost of all the extra requirements would be the cost onto the homeowner versus to offset whichever department this may fall under.
Yes, I agree 100% with that. You know, there's going to have to be training, there's going to have to be installation people, there's going to have to be a lot of insurance considerations. But I think Alex has a lot of those things coming together as a network, and I think legal will also share some of Paul's and Bobby's concerns from where is the city's responsibility if the waiver is signed off. I think it's all serious questions, but I think it's best to have these players in one room, and we can get some answers from them. I think because it kind of just gets the planning department are busy, and what do you do next? It just keeps piling. So I think a public meeting will give that presentation as well, and it'll either kick it in the pants to move it ahead, or it'll just stop it dead. So I think there's no harm in a public consultation.
And
That's my
just,
point,
if
but-
I could, Chair, as a follow-up, I had the opportunity of seeing a demonstration of one of these pool covers, and I was far more of a naysayer until I saw the demonstration, and it's too bad we didn't have an opportunity to present a video of a demonstration to the public, because it's very new. It's a very new concept. I'd never heard of it until probably a year ago.
There is some promotional videos, and I'm sure we'll. I think Alex will have one there, I believe, showing the operation of the pool cover. And but like Councillor or like Bob Kenny said, there are questions as to if it's open and if it's left open, what happens, right? So, Rosemary Herbert.
Yes, I just wanted to emphasize again, I think we have to hear from Red Cross. We need to get research around comparison of safety, in particular around drownings, right? I'm sure the mechanics are lovely, they're great, as long as people remember to close them, but there's always human error. So I think we really have to look to the research, and if they're comparable, well, that's, one scenario. If the Red Cross is recommending, based on research, that a pool should be fenced, then that's very crucial information to inform the public. And personally, I don't know. I don't really agree with showing a video about how they work, because people kind of get caught up with the technology, right? It's the safety that we're responsible for. And the liability is important for the city, but number one should be safety. That's our obligation, from my perspective.
Yeah, and of course, the big argument is, you know, the safety factor. And that is, you know, is a fence any different? Like, if you leave the gate open, it's human error, right? So you have to kind of, it's hard to wrap your head around it, but a fence doesn't guarantee either. It's just an easy way for the municipality to put a bylaw together and to say, hey, you need a fence. I don't need a qualified person to inspect it and install. I just need a fence up, right? So, but it has to be so high, and that's why a lot of municipalities just go with the fence, right? But things change, and we have to kind of
And for me,
keep an open mind.
To Rosemary's point, nowhere did I think that the information on what these were would take away from the safety. It was more giving every ounce of information possible to the public and to council and to this committee, because a lot of us have never even heard of these things before.
Thank you very much, Rosemary and Alana, and Bob Kenny.
I've already
For the
used up
last
my
time.
For the last time, I promise. I just want, when you mentioned the fences, any pool I've been in with the fence has a spring-loaded gate. So when you go out, the gate closes, and when it closes behind you. So I just wanted to mention that.
Hang around rich people. Just teasing. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Any other questions, concerns at this point? If not, then of course the job is to go with either the recommendation or not to go. So unless we have another motion that someone wants to entertain. So do I have a motion of some sort? To Rosemary?
Can I make a different motion, Mr. Chair?
You can put it on the floor.
I move that we wait until we have heard from Red Cross, looked at the research around drownings, and that we have all answers from this committee answered before we proceed to public consultation.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Okay, Councilor, or resident member Bob Kenny. Keep saying council because I keep Mitchell's wheels. Okay, so we have a motion to wait until more information is given before heading to a public consultation. Any other comments, concerns?
I think for
All
clarity,
those-
it's that
sorry.
from Red Cross around the safety of around drownings, if they had some research, correct?
How it's going to be operationalized. So who is going to inspect them? You know, how is that going to happen within the city? Who's going to pay for the training? And, you know, is it a good investment of money for half a dozen, I guess bottom line, is this a good way to invest city funds for half a dozen requests? You know, if it's going to cost a lot of money. So I just think we have to have the whole picture before we take it to
Can
public
I just add
consultation.
something?
Yes, Laura, go right ahead.
I think and possibly, and I mean, this isn't my file, but possibly the reason the recommendation was made to proceed to public consultation is because what you're asking for, Rosemary, is quite a lot of work to develop a bylaw and develop regulations before we even know if it's something that's going to be entertained by the council, and if it's even plausible for us. So I think the idea was to proceed to public consultation just to see how much response there was from the public, if this is something that, you know, there's a lot of people that really want, or if it's just a few people shouting loudly. And then if that were the case, then as staff, Mr. Forbes would have to go back and do the research, and you would have to defer to one of those 4 recommendations within his report as how you wanted him to proceed. And if one of those recommendations was to get that amount of research, then would have to be done before we would ever entertain adopting a bylaw, because you'd have to go through the whole bylaw adoption process first.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. If you don't support it, then perhaps with Laurel's recommendation, someone could make a motion on that one. But for now, we have the motion to not to proceed until we have Red Cross's opinion along with legal, I believe, to move forward. All those in favor of the motion on the floor? 1, 2, 3. Those against the motion on the floor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the motion is defeated 5-3. So I'll need a motion to,
I'm going to move a motion that we go to public meeting, and thank you, Laurel, for providing that clarification, because it has been something that's been discussed for a long time. There has been already legal in. I think this is just one more piece to the puzzle that we can decide, is it something that we need to look at doing this on a bigger scale? So thank you.
That's my interpretation. I'm
Right.
not trying to speak for Mr. Forbes, but that's my interpretation on it.
okay, we now have a motion on the floor. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it, knowing that the only thing we're doing is another piece to this, similar to how we did this with developing an STR bylaw, that there's just, this piece
Yep.
needs to be addressed, but by no means have we sanctioned it or said that will happen. It's more so for
Yeah,
another
there's-
piece
yeah,
of
no
information.
decision. It just.
So I would second it based
yeah.
on that.
Okay, so we now have a seconder for the motion. So all those in favor of the motion of going to a public consultation, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And against is the 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So we got a 5-3 vote to go to a public consultation on swimming pool covers. And that's to go to council first. Yep. Yep. That's our recommendation, going to council. Okay, where are we at here? So we need that's number 8. Number 9 is reconsideration, Malpec Road, PID number 1047562, and it's the now known as the Hidden Valley subdivision. I believe, Laurel, you've got the floor. God love you.
Oh my gosh. So this is another one of Mr. Forbes' applications, and I'm also going to speak to this to the best of my ability, but this file was actually mine, the Hidden Valley subdivision, and under the bylaw, we aren't allowed to judge our own applications. So if I review a subdivision or a building permit application and someone asks for reconsideration, I don't review the report. That's why Mr. Forbes wrote the report on this. So he was completely independent of anything that I did. So in his absence, I'm just presenting his report and his recommendation and findings. So basically, this was a reconsideration for approval of a preliminary subdivision plan on April 26, 2022. And the subdivision plan was for a 90-lot subdivision at 339 Malpec Road. The total acreage for Phase 1 and 2 of the subdivision is 41 acres. And the subdivision plan was attached to your report. I also have it right here. So there's 2 phases. Phase 1 and Phase 2. So on April 26th, preliminary approval was granted. On May 16th, 2022, staff received a request from Janet Roach to have the decision reconsidered by council. Staff were subsequently advised that there was also a separate appeal that had been filed by Catherine Morris to the Island Regulatory and Appeals Commission. And even though there's separate parties involved, they did agree to hold the appeal at IRAC in abeyance until the reconsideration was determined by council. So the primary concern of Ms. Roach relates to traffic impact of the proposed 90-lot subdivision in relation to the adjacent developed residential subdivision, Highfield Heights. And in particular, she states that there should have been an independent traffic study prepared to review the various impacts of the expected volume of traffic on the local streets from this new subdivision. So the appellant, based on their appeal, is Section 3.153C of the bylaw, alludes to the fact that there was clear doubt as to the correctness of the order of the decision in the first instance. So that is what they base their appeal on. So when reconsideration is requested, there's what we call a threshold test that's required to be, the application must meet. So they have to pass a threshold test and provide sufficient particulars in the request to show that the request falls within the stated grounds contained in Section 3.153 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw. So basically, Council may review, rescind, change, or vary any order or decision made by the development officer or by council, provided that new material facts or evidence not available at the time of the initial order or decision have come to light, a material change of circumstances has occurred since the initial order or decision, or there is clear doubt as to the correctness of the order or decision in the first instance. So, if after reviewing a recommendation from Planning Board, Council determines that the request passes the threshold test, they can opt to send it to a public meeting. So currently we're at the threshold test stage, and there was, the appellant has requested the reconsideration pursuant to section 3.5. And she's basing it on there was material facts, evidence not available at the time of the decision. Mr. Forbes has indicated that he felt there is no evidence offered by the applicant to suggest that there were new material facts, evidence that wasn't available at the time of the decision of approving the preliminary subdivision. However, the developer did voluntarily commission a traffic study, which is relevant to the reconsideration request. The appellant's arguments were outlined in the report, and she indicated that a traffic study should have been required before the preliminary subdivision approval was provided. A traffic study should have taken into consideration the impact on adjacent subdivisions in the neighborhood. There's a reference to section 3.39C wherein an application for a development shall be rejected if there is not a safe and efficient access to the public street. Reference to section 3.39E wherein the proposed development would be detrimental to the convenience, health, or safety of the residents in the vicinity or the general public, and reference was made to the fact that Route 2 access should have been considered as a requirement of the proposed subdivision. So staff have reviewed the letter of concerns received from the appellant and offer the following. There was basically, there was no, it was Mr. Forbes' assessment that there was no inherent deficiency in the application, and that the, in the case of the traffic study that was commissioned by the property owners, it was prepared by Michael McDonald from Harborside Transportation Consultants in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and he has extensive knowledge in traffic reviews, traffic assessments, preparing traffic studies. He has a broad range of expertise in the fields of geometric design, transportation planning, active transportation, traffic engineering, municipal engineering, road design, and stakeholder consultation. Mr. McDonald outlined various recommendations in his report, and he also addressed the concerns that were raised by residents within his report regarding relating to trip generation. He also indicated in his report that the existing Highfield Heights subdivision, it was developed in the early 1980s, 1990s, and that when that subdivision was developed, this connection to the existing parcel of land was contemplated at that time because the road connectors were shown on the subdivision plan in the 80s. So staff would point out that the traffic engineer also responded to the concerns raised by the appellant as to why the developer was not required to provide a separate access from the proposed subdivision to Malpeck Road. And the traffic engineer points out that there is not sufficient traffic to warrant this type of direct access to Malpeck Road, and connections from local streets to minor arterials should not be provided unless the traffic numbers specifically require it. Staff would also suggest that the traffic report validates was generally known about the traffic impacts from the proposed subdivision at the time the subdivision was under review, and the city engineer had been in discussions with planning and development to review all the required street access connections and determine whether the proposed road geometry was acceptable to meet the Transportation Association guidelines, Canadian guidelines. So in closing, Mr. Forbes indicated in his report that the traffic review provided by Mr. McDonald answers the questions posed by the appellant and explains why staff accepted the preliminary plan of subdivision. The subdivision approval process in Charlottetown lays out the requirements of developers to meet all of the established criteria outlined in the official plan and zoning bylaw. And in this case, staff believe the developer submitted a subdivision application that satisfied all the technical requirements in her bylaw, such as the reconsideration request should not proceed. And such, the reconsideration request should not proceed. So he does not feel that the threshold test was met, and he's recommending for planning board to recommend to council to deny the request for reconsideration. And in that case, this application would proceed to IRAC, and the applicants have the option to mediate at IRAC, or they can go ahead with an appeal. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Laurel. Any questions, concerns? Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. And I have a couple, only because I never recall seeing this application in the first place. So I find it hard to reconsider an application that you weren't involved in the decision in the first place. So I'm struggling a little bit and just trying to understand the whole thing. And again, you know, when we talk about traffic studies, what traffic studies are looking at is the roads or the infrastructure's ability to handle the cars on the road. And I'm guessing that when they talk about a traffic study, they're thinking that they're looking at the amount of cars and vehicles that's going to be disruptive to their community. Is probably, I'm sure they're not thinking infrastructure and whether or not the...
Well, they're looking at safety, they're looking
Correct.
at the load of traffic that the roads are able to take, where safe access is. They looked at Malpeck Road, if that was appropriate and if it's safe. Generally with residential subdivisions, you want them to connect to residential subdivisions because it's local streets as opposed to funneling residential traffic onto an arterial highway, which isn't a safe option. You would need significant infrastructure in place, such as traffic signals, roundabouts, those kinds of things. And so those are kind of the things that they look at. It's you know, it encompasses safety. It also encompasses traffic volumes and geometry, road geometry.
Okay, and that's why I'm a teacher. But also the, this is an as of right zone, right? This isn't, they didn't come looking for a rezoning application. This was approved. And so it wasn't like the last application where 75%'s been done and they thought that the remaining
Come back
lots.
and
This is
change the
something
zone.
that's always been there since early in the 1980s, 90s, it says, correct?
Yes, so the original subdivision, I think it's called Highfield Heights, it was approved in the 1980s. And on that subdivision plan, when you look at it, you can see the actual road connectors from the streets within the subdivision to the adjacent piece of land, which is now the Hidden Valley subdivision. So even today, when we approve a subdivision plan, we require connectors to adjacent pieces of land because you want interconnectivity between neighborhoods. You don't want enclaves where one subdivision is here and the next subdivision is here and they have to access arterial roads or collector roads to get in and out of their subdivision. You want people to be able to travel safely throughout and kids to be able to access a piece of parkland that's on this side of you know, this subdivision as well as a piece of parkland that's in this area. So you want interconnectivity and walkability and safety within subdivisions. And it is disruptive when, you know, somebody's living in a subdivision and somebody decides to develop the piece of land next to them because, you know, you've got construction vehicles, you've got dust, you've got noise. That's all part of construction. So it's definitely disruptive to the residents that live in that subdivision. But over time, when that subdivision's completed, you're growing a neighborhood. And that's why we require interconnectivity between pieces of land to another piece of land.
And there is multiple access points?
What's
There
that?
is multiple access points in and out?
Yes.
So
yeah.
it's not just a one entrance?
No, it's not just one entrance. So, and then over time, as Malpeck Road gets developed, there may be requirement at that time by the province. They may allow access to Malpeck Road. But at this time, it's sort of like what happened in East Royalty with the roundabouts. When it's warranted and there's the amount of development, then they would look at upgrading the streets.
And has that been explored? That was my last question with the province. Has there been extensive discussion? I mean, it makes sense sometimes when you do border on that property where you could work collaboratively to to have a second access point out. Was there a
Yeah,
reason why they won't do that?
When they originally put the application in for the subdivision, and you are correct, this would not have come to council because the bylaw does not require subdivision to go forward and be reviewed by council because it's very technical. If the zoning is in place, the zoning is in place. So they have to meet those requirements in the bylaw. One of the things that we did do, we did meet with the province. There was a meeting between various city departments and provincial counterparts on the subdivision before they ever moved forward. And that was one of the questions at that meeting was access to Malpeck Road. And at the time, the province did not support it because of the significant upgrades that would be required to Malpeck Road and the safety issues. And they said that they would look at that later on if the opposite side of Malpeck Road were to be developed and this subdivision were to be developed and there was pressure to upgrade Malpeck Road and put in more traffic signalized intersection or a roundabout.
Good.
Am I good? I don't know if I'm good, but thank you for your information.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think the province's point is simply that once the traffic builds up, that's going to warrant a work done on Malpeck Road, then they'll do so. And this probably will be one more nail in the coffin that's going to give the province some more, to get it done. But it's clearly a provincial matter, the access on the Malpeck Road, and in discussions, I think this will certainly help that. But. Yeah, we take all the heat, yeah. But unfortunately, we can only go with what the bylaws that we have at hand, and staff's recommendation at this point is that the reconsideration is to be denied. So any other comments, concerns? Oh, how could I forget you? Councillor Yankoff.
Just struggling with how to formulate my question. So this original subdivision was always an as of right, and we're only here now because they are now expanding into the Hidden Valley area, which they originally had already been permitted to in the 80s. Is that correct?
So I guess, how can I explain this? So in the 80s, when Highfield Heights, I think it's Highfield Heights, was developed, that subdivision, there was a road system that was put in place. And when you see where those roads like Line Drive and all those streets within the subdivision, they were extended. They stopped at the border for what is now Hidden Valley subdivision. So they were extended to the border so that when the developer of Hidden Valley, whether that would have been 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or now, started their development, they would connect to those streets, and it would be a continuation into that piece of land. So it would be another phase of subdivision development, whether it was by the same developer that developed that subdivision years ago or a new property owner. But when we review a subdivision application today, we also required, if we were looking at a raw piece of land, there's one in particular I'm dealing with right now in East Royalty. We've asked that developer to provide connectors to all the lands to the north, south, and east, so that if and when that land gets developed, that the next developer would connect to that road system, so there's interconnectivity. So that is a planning mechanism that's been in place for years. I mean, well before the 80s. I mean, even in downtown Charlottetown, if you look at the grid system and the way the roads are laid out in the neighborhoods, they flow into each other. There's no, separate neighborhoods that are exclusive of each other. And that's what we're trying to promote when we look at subdivision development, is interconnectivity between neighborhoods.
Thank you very much, Laurel. Thank you, Alana. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yes.
just
Donna Waddell.
quickly, this would have been in what was known as Winslow, and the province of Prince Edward Island would have been the authority at that time. They would
Exactly.
have made the requirement, and they would have been the ones who would have approved the original subdivision. So it is the province, it would have been probably Jake Bartlett, who would have required those access, much as we just saw a few minutes ago in the one on Mount Edward Road. I mean, we have two dead ends going nowhere, a proposed road going with two dead ends going nowhere. But what we're doing is we bring it right to up to the next property, so that when that property owner goes to develop, he'll have to connect to that road. So indeed, that's it. All my years, and certainly the province, that's what we would have done. West Ronny, where I was, we had our own planning. We did our own planning, but Winslow did not. So it would have been the province who would have made that allowance back in the 80s.
Okay, it's a good light. Thank you very much. Any other comments, concerns, questions? None? Okay, so the planning's recommendation is for council to deny the request, and for that to happen, we need to give it our blessing or not. So, do we have a motion to agree with staff's recommendation? Don't everybody jump at once.
I don't mind. This is my issue. When you look at the 3 threshold questions, when you have to look at reconsideration, unfortunately, I'm not seeing a reason for us to reconsider. I feel very bad for the residents of this community. They do have the option to go to IRAC, and because this was something that was decided where we had no input, I'm going to have to vote to support staff recommendation not to reconsider.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much for that.
I'll second it.
Okay.
And echoing Councillor McCabe's whole thought around these 3 thresholds, and the one that Ms. Much had, I think it was that her last name? The person who applied in here under 3.5.
Ms. Roach.
Ms. Roach,
yes,
sorry.
yeah.
That the material, she felt that the material, new material wasn't available at the time of the original, but what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing it correctly, is that the material was available at the time. So therefore, I feel bad for the residents, absolutely, but I do have to second the motion to support staff's recommendation to not proceed with a reconsideration.
Okay, moved by Councilor McCabe, seconded by Councilor Yankov. Any other questions, concerns? If not, let's vote. Anyone who's in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. That includes everyone, so it's unanimous that we take staff's recommendation. Okay, there's no more to report. Anything under new business, folks? Anything to bring up at this point? I see not. Okay, I'll need one more motion, and that's to adjourn. Moved by Councilor McCabe, seconded by Basil Hamley. Thank you, everybody in favor. Good. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Drive safe, folks. Have a good night.